Learning a foreign language is one of the most beneficial things you can do for your brain. It lowers your risk of Alzheimer's later in life, it increases your brain elasticity, and it broadens your worldview. Sounds great, right? But what if you don't want to pay tens of thousands of dollars to go to school for it, and you just want to learn a language without it becoming the center of your life? Well, you've come to the right place, because I've done all the research so you don't have to, and I've come up with a way to maximize your language learning and make it the most effective and efficient experience possible. This will work on any language, but first you need to have the right mindset to learn. And unfortunately, the foreign language classes taught in most English-speaking countries really work against this mindset. But don't worry, you can still learn a new language all on your own, and even better than any class will ever teach you. Foreign language classes tend to commit two of the biggest sins possible in language learning. One, encouraging in-the-head translation, and two, sucking all the fun out of language learning. But let's focus on in-the-head translation first. In lots of foreign language classes, one of the many things they get you to do is translate from the target language into English and vice versa. I've even had to do this at a university level class. This is so wrong because it adds mental distance between the word and its meaning. This causes your mental process when reaching for a word to look like this: the thing to English to your target language. This is way closer to memorization than it is to actually learning the word. This is what the flowchart should look like. And your first language should come into play as little as possible. Your understanding should be subconscious. However, I do understand it will take you much longer to learn without using translation at the beginning. And here is where you can use this dirty trick to help you get a head start on learning your language. It's called the double translation method. It involves reading a book, but not just any boring old textbook. You can read any book of your choice, but there is a catch. You have to read it in your target language, and then every paragraph or so, you reflect. You write down what happens every paragraph. Then you check to see how well you understood by looking at it in your first language. This will really help you with vocabulary and grammar, as long as you pay attention and put in the effort. This method isn't as harmful as in-the-head translation, because the mental process still never goes from language to language. It goes from language to concept to language in your mind, because you're summarizing in your own words. The downside to this method is it can get pretty mentally taxing. It's important to have less stressful exercises when learning a language. These can involve more passive exercises, like watching a movie or listening to music in your target language. This brings me to the second major method that can really speed up your language learning process. It's called CLIL. It stands for Content and Language Integrated Learning. This method is used in European and other bilingual country school systems, as well as the Border Patrol training of the United States. It's basically learning new information in a new language. I know that sounds hard, both in general and to replicate outside of school, but it is one of the most proven techniques in second language acquisition. It works because when you learn a new concept, you just through necessity understand the words in which you learned it. It also dramatically increases brain elasticity. That means you'll learn a lot faster. Now that you know what to do in order to learn a new language, I'm going to tell you what not to do. The number one worst thing you can do when learning a language is avoiding speaking the language. It is imperative that you try to speak out loud from day one, even if all you can say is, "Hello, what is your name?" Being embarrassed or afraid of making mistakes is not something you can afford to do. It's simply inevitable. Speaking your target language out loud and without thinking about whether or not what you're saying is wrong is the biggest step to understanding a language on a subconscious level. So those two major methods should be your bread and butter in learning languages. But here are some quick tips you can add on to solidify your chances of success. First, do whatever you can to avoid getting burnt out on studying. This is a very important point. I'd suggest starting out with 30 minutes of active studying per day. If that feels like too much or too little, then adjust. Everyone is different when it comes to learning. Another great small exercise is flashcards. They do take extra effort to make, but they are worth it. One thing to keep in mind though, is to not include your first language anywhere on the card. Have one side of the card be the word in your target language, and the other side should be a picture or some other non-verbal representation of the concept. And finally, try your best to find a native speaker to help you. A good place to look is one of the many pen pal or language exchange websites. In the description, I've included a list of my top picks for these websites.